You might have been hearing about microchips in the news. There's been a shortage due to supply delays. Also, Taiwan makes most of the microchips and semiconductors out there, and there's kind of a conflict going on between China and Taiwan, so it's causing stresses across the globe. Well, guess what? Countries across the globe are adapting to the microchip environment, or the microchip problem. In this video, I'm going to update you on the microchip news and some information about the industry you might not know that has caused the problem we are dealing with today. Starting off with, Spain has invested $13 billion into microchip industry, reducing its dependence on Asia. This comes announced after they met at the World Economic Forum. The European Union has announced $48 billion in a plan to become a major semiconductor producer, mirroring Joe Biden's $52 billion plan that we will talk about later. China is helping Russia with goods against the war in Ukraine, specifically with microchips, to help with both civilian and military applications. This is a translation of a title, so I'm not 100% sure if it's right, but I have another article that's saying China has multiplied its exports to Russia of goods necessary for war in Ukraine. Like microchips, probably auto sales have been impacted by the microchip problem. Production supply is still low and in a wild card state, so there are lower than expected sales in June for auto, and it seems there is no clear sign when the supply issues will abate. Well, GM is trying to solve their own problems. They hope by 2025 to make their own microchips. I would assume this is domestically, but they want to cut out their dependence on other companies and possibly countries by producing their own microchips. There is a U.S. microchip supplier that says it will build a $1.8 billion plant in Indiana. It's Skywater Technology, announcing this days after the U.S. Senate voted a measure in, which we'll talk about in just a moment. But first, interesting to hear. Now, if you've been paying attention to the housing industry and the housing market, you know that there is a huge bubble in Phoenix, and just Arizona overall is at the high of its housing costs wave. Well, apparently there's a senator named Senator Kelly who wants microchip funding law to be implemented as soon as possible. He wants to bring microchip and semiconductor facilities to Arizona more, to make it a hub in the U.S. for that kind of thing. That's interesting because the neighboring state, New Mexico, has IBM that makes the semiconductor and microchips as well. They actually make it for the military here, so if you didn't know, don't tell. But speaking of the government and its the microchip law, specifically, Bernie Sanders files an amendment to limit how much money will be going to this corporate initiative. The CHIPS Act, which cleared a key procedural hurdle, they say, would prohibit companies that receive subsidies under the bill from using the funds to buy back their own stock. That's good. What does the CHIPS Act do? It's a legislative bill that gives money to U.S. semiconductor manufacturing companies to subsidize it by the tens of billions of dollars. The approval for such subsidies would be a major boon for companies like Intel. It looks like the total compensation for the package is $179 million. Bernie Sanders says, no. That we don't want to give the industry a blank check. That's for $76 billion, despite the needs of the military for advanced microchips, he says, despite the needs for the medical industry for advanced microchips, or the American economy. The industry is threatening to abandon this country and move abroad. That is a true threat that Sanders is saying there. Obviously, we have a dependence to Taiwan for microchips. That is the whole problem. But it's not just the U.S. that has that problem. Obviously, Spain and Europe as well, not to mention the other continents on this planet, are probably going to have to solve this problem as well and create their own manufacturing for semiconductors or microchips. So If the US doesn't make it, that just creates a new dependence on a foreign country that could be abated if we create this microchip industry. But Sanders says that we need to keep a closer look of how it's being spent, which is reasonable. And it's interesting to see the government loves to give these big packages out to have these incentives to create new economic opportunity, and there always seems to be opportunity for that to not go well. I found this interesting article that gave me some more information about manufacturing companies and the microchip industry. Let's review some recent history. It says over the last 20 years, the microchip industry has shut down over 708 manufacturing plants and eliminated 150,000 American jobs while moving most of its production overseas, receiving over $9.5 billion in government subsidies or loans. In other words, in order to make a profit, these companies took a government subsidy and took the jobs overseas away from American workers. Now, as a reward for bad behavior, these companies are in line to receive massive taxpayer handout to undo the damage they did, supposedly. That may make sense to someone, but doesn't make sense to me. In total, it has been estimated that 5 major semiconductor companies will receive the lion's share of the taxpayer handout: Intel, Texas Instruments, Micron Technology, Global Foundries, and Samsung. Samsung, a Korean company, is getting money to build a manufacturing plant in the U.S. That's quite wild. These 5 companies made $70 billion in profits last year. Now, Samsung is from South Korea, and it is one of the biggest companies, obviously, in South Korea. The Korean government gave a lot of subsidies to some of these big companies, these big family companies like Samsung, throughout the history that has enabled its fast growth. So Samsung is really used to governments kind of bending over and giving them whatever they want, and they're getting it with the U.S. government. The company will most likely these companies will most likely benefit from the taxpayer assistance. But Intel made $20 billion in profits during the pandemic. It had $16.6 billion to spend, not on research and development, but buying back its own stocks and in rewarding its executives and wealthy shareholders. So shocking news. Intel's kind of corrupt. I mean, they do make the government microchips, but it is interesting because I had no clue about this with the industry. Another company that would receive taxpayer assistance under the legislation is Texas Instruments. That's a legacy company in the U.S. Last year, Texas Instruments made $7.8 billion in profit. In 2020, the company spent $2.5 billion buying back its own stock, while it has outsourced thousands of good-paying American jobs, they say, to low-wage countries. Wow. So I think there was a bill trying to limit senators or government people from buying stocks with back or insider information. These buybacks are insane and definitely contributed to that bull run that we had in 2020 and 2021. But will these companies survive even with those government subsidies? As you know, when a company gets free money from the government, they don't usually spend it like it is their last dollar, if you know what I mean. Typically, when companies get free government money, they spend it willingly and not holding back. Obviously, it goes into the business to improve the company, but some of these billions of dollars will, yes, likely go to paying people's bonuses, their vacations, their salaries. That's just how it goes with employment and buying things. So the microchip industry is definitely changing. There's more manufacturing going on across the globe, and there seems to be a race to make the best semiconductors or microchips in the U.S. using government subsidies. But let's see how it goes and if the money is spread evenly. This is my update for you on the microchip industry. In my channel, I do tech news and tech job news. So if you like this video, please subscribe. Let me know in the comments below. Did you know what was going on with microchips in the news? Are you surprised to hear Spain? Honestly, outside of tourism and I'm sure some sort of food related production. I'm not sure what Spain makes a ton of money from, design. So it's interesting to see Spain is trying to create a new economy with the microchip, semiconductor manufacturing. Makes sense. It's a good opportunity. I just definitely did not see that coming. Please share this video with anyone any techie friends that you have that might want to watch, and subscribe so you can see my next upload. Thanks for watching this video, and I hope to see you in the next one.